Welcome to Healthcare IT Today. I'm John Lynn, together with my colleague and friend Colin Hung. The world of technology and healthcare ever changing in new and novel ways, and that's why we love this stuff. So join us as we discuss the latest healthcare and health IT news, meshed together in new ways which help generate ideas and new perspectives. Plus, we'll have a little fun along the way. Today, we're going to be introducing a new format called Big Deal, Little Deal, No Deal, looking at a number of different topics and discussing if they're a big deal or not. And be sure to follow the show on social media at the hashtag HITSM and our personal accounts at TechEye and at Colin_Hung. Plus, check out our 18 years of health IT content at healthcareittoday.com. You know, I stole this from sports radio. This is Big Deal, Little Deal. That's where we get our best inspiration, huh?
Why not? Why not? This is not just for the record. This is not inspired by Deal or No Deal, which is copyrighted, and we don't have any suitcases to open, and there's no banker. So just clarify that.
I wonder if people would want. Could we tweak that? That's interesting.
We could tweak that format. We'll think about that for our next episode. But yeah, this is gonna be exciting. Digging into some interesting statistics today and some interesting headlines, and I'm interested to hear what you think of some of these things, whether they are not a big deal. And we have a special question for the fourth one today. So,
Nice.
All right, let's hop right to it, John. Is it a big deal, little deal, or no deal that 190 million patients use MyChart with 5 billion logins each year into Epic MyChart? This coming, of course, from your Epic Stats article that you published on Healthcare IT Today. So what are your thoughts there?
It's a hard one, right? Because 190 million patients use MyChart. There's 300 million in the US. Granted, they have some international, right? So, you have to add that in as well. 5 billion logins, right? Like, that's a lot of logins. But here's the challenge. It's twofold. One is MyChart only has some of the info. It doesn't have everything. So that diminishes some of the return a little bit. And then the second one is that, okay, it's 5 billion logins, but should it be 100 billion, right? Like that's the real question that I'm not sure we know the answer to, right? It's like, so I guess I would say it's a little deal maybe that it's like, wow, okay, people are using MyChart. You can't argue with that number, and that they're getting access to a lot of data and info, and that's good. That's a good trend that patients actually care enough to log in and get their data, schedule appointments, do other things like that. But I'd say it would be a big deal if we knew how many should be logging in, because 190 million patients, my math is slow, but that's not very many logins per patient when you look at it. And then, certainly there's the aggressive users that are probably at hundreds of logins that make it even smaller. So I don't know. I mean, it's big numbers, but it's really saying Epic's really big as much as it is saying that, like, hey, this is a huge deal.
Interesting. I mean, I am actually going to put this in the big deal category. And I say that only for two reasons. One, MyChart hasn't been around as long as Epic's been around, right? So MyChart's a fairly recent, and I use that loosely. It's fairly recent,
10 years or so.
right? Yeah. And so to get to 190 million patients in that short of a time for what essentially is a very B2B, very specifically focused portal, that's impressive. Like we're not talking about a social media platform. We're not talking about anything like that. So to get that many users, I would like just the comparison. I'm going, that's pretty dang successful, right? Now, you could argue they're forced to, you could argue that's the only way, there's sort of more incentive to log into this than there is maybe to log into TikTok every day, although some probably would argue
I
with
was
that.
gonna say I'd argue the opposite. It's not fun. Like we're not going to MyChart if we want to, right? Like,
No, no, and on top of that, 5 billion logins each year. I mean, that's again a very gargantuan number. Now, we know it's because Epic is that large. They own such a big part of the market. But again, just in terms of healthcare scale, I mean, that's big. Like this is now talking about like government IRS big, like logging in to look at your tax, like that. This is pretty big numbers. So from that point of view, I think it's a big deal. The one thing I'd be interested in that would maybe detract from it a little bit is I wonder how many of these are duplicate patients. Like, am I logging into like the same patient, but is logging into four different my charts because they have charts in different four different places, right? So, how many unique users is it compared to non-unique? But at any rate, it's still big numbers, still impressive. I think, it's a testament to the fact that not so much that Epic has made a good portal, but more that organizations really believe that this is a good way for patients to go and get access to their medical records, which we know, as you said, not complete, but it's sort of the best we got. And I think it's a testament more to the healthcare providers to say, hey, this is now part of our workflow, guys. Like, you really do have to log in here to get all the information. And it's where you book your appointments now, and it's where you get all this other stuff. So kudos for making it work.
Well, and it's a classic case of anytime a health IT vendor like Epic, an EHR vendor shares data, it makes you question what's the rest of the data. Like how many messages were sent through the MyChart, right? How many payments were made? How many appointments were scheduled, right? Like of those 5 billion logins, how many did something meaningful once they logged in? How many records were downloaded? How many, whatever. Like that those are probably the more meaningful numbers, in startup world they call vanity metrics. It's slightly a vanity metric, the logins, right? And 190 million patients, well, how many are active, right? That's the other kind of more question. That's, at the end of the day, it would be really interesting to hear how many messages were sent by patients and how many appointments were done. That would give some more meat to the bone to say, oh, that is really a big deal. And my guess is a majority of them, I could be wrong, but I bet the majority is sending patient messages because that's become so popular. In fact, that's why doctors are so overwhelmed with inbox messages. That's why they had to create their AI to help the doctors respond to the messages quicker. In Basket Art is the name of that AI tool that they created. So my guess is that, which is a good thing, right? It's good that they're interacting with the doctor.
No, I think so. I think so. So we're a little split on that one. So that's a good one. Let's get to the next one, John. Is it a big deal, little deal, or no deal that 46% of healthcare organizations now host their databases all or mostly in the cloud versus 36% for other sectors? This is according to a study done by Redgate.
Yeah, so I would say when I heard the 46% number, I thought it was way low. So, I mean, to me, that's kind of a big deal that the move to there hasn't. And it's interesting that other industries are behind healthcare. Like, that was surprising to me too. Like, I thought we were doing okay. I didn't think we were like super behind when it comes to going to the cloud, but like, I actually thought we were further along than 46%. So, for me, that was kind of a big deal that, hey, there's a lot of on-prem still happening across the world, but in healthcare in particular. So that was a big deal for me.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you on this one. I think it's a big deal, but not because of the percentage. I think the percentage of 46% is low. Like, I think it's actually lower than it needs to be and should be by this time, by 2024. So that I'm disappointed in. So I would, if that was alone, I would say that's a little deal. It should be bigger. But the fact that healthcare is ahead of most of the other sectors, that to me was surprising. Usually we always rail on healthcare being behind and not adopting new technology. Lo and behold, according to Redgate, we're actually ahead of the game, or maybe in the top quartile, right, of industries adopting this, which is actually pretty surprising to me. I thought we were in the middle of the pack at the best, but probably trailing the pack more likely. So this was a bit shocking to me that we're actually ahead of other people.
I agree. And here's the other thing you look at and you say, oh, no wonder Google, Amazon, Microsoft Azure are all spending so much money getting their cloud offerings out there because 50% of the market is still waiting to move to the cloud. Now, it won't all move, but basically, there's still a lot of green space for the cloud vendors. So it makes sense why those three companies who are doing really well with cloud and healthcare still have a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Is like there's a lot of green space market available. And the other way to look at it, which may make these numbers more understandable, is, healthcare does generate a lot of data, right? Like, of all the industries, our industry produces probably one of the highest amounts of data on a per person per annum basis. So you look at that and go, well, we probably want to move to the cloud because we just don't have anywhere to store it internally, right? Internal storage, hosted storage is so expensive. Cloud storage, so much more cost effective. So maybe the growth is really just a reflection of the amount of data that we're producing and all that imaging data. Like I would say imaging data has probably moved to the cloud a lot faster than other data. And maybe that's what sort of is pushing this percentage, right? Because you think of all the data that healthcare generates, imaging being some of the largest. Maybe they're sort of ahead of the game and sort of pulling the rest of the healthcare higher in the percentage.
Yeah, well, and we've seen a shift from the EHR vendors to embracing the cloud. I mean, I was talking to Rackspace recently. That's the number one Epic hosting, third-party hosting provider now. And that was a big thing that they talked about. That before Epic wouldn't do the cloud, and now they've embraced it fully, and they've made the tools available to do it in the cloud effectively. Now, sure, you want to make sure you do it the right way. Rackspace has taught me that a lot too, right? That Epic, you just don't want to throw it on a public cloud and say good luck, right? Like there's a lot of expertise required to do it properly. But I think those EHR vendors embracing the cloud has helped to push this along in a really big way as well. I mean, we're even seeing organizations. I had a CIO podcast recently. He said we're 100% in the cloud. And he did talk about some of the negatives of that, right? Some of the costs associated with it, some of the other, expertise. How do they have the expertise to do it, right? There were some challenges associated with it, but it's fascinating to see that like he had been able to make it all the way to 100% cloud. They didn't have any data center, which certainly his organization's unique. I don't think that's going to be true for most organizations, but it shows the trend of what's possible.
Yeah. I mean, but to our earlier points, it's like, why isn't it higher? Right? Like you think about it, like for all these big reasons, the fact that healthcare is so expensive, they're always looking for cost efficiencies, that, there are a lot of areas of healthcare that are not clinical that could be moved, right? Like payroll and all these other things. You would think that healthcare would be embracing cloud a lot faster than other industries. I mean, because we've largely solved the HIPAA problem, right? Like it's been years since we've talked about privacy issues, at least in terms of having something stored not hosted, right? I think we've all come to terms with it. That's no longer the blocker. So I still kind of go back to that, going, yeah, I'm with you in that number should be a lot higher. And I'm surprised that there's so much green space, but it'll be interesting to see what this number grows to in the next few years, because maybe are we sort of at that hockey stick side, where it's just going to accelerate from here on end.
I mean, there probably is one answer to that, which is the cost of a data center. So many of them, invested millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into their own data center, building it. Data centers aren't cheap, right? You have to have the cooling, you have to have the electricity, you have to have the fire suppression systems, et cetera, right? Like, so when you invest that much money into a data center, it's tough to just say, okay, let's just move it to the cloud after you've made that investment. So it takes time to kind of reel off that investment that you've made. So I think that's probably why some of them are still sitting there. It's like, hey, we already made the capital investment, so we got to play this out. But yeah, eventually we'll get there.
No, that's a good point. Like maybe we're getting to that point where some of those data centers are reaching end of life, or now it's becoming too expensive to maintain or upgrade, right, to the new standards. And so they're finally looking at that equation, going, okay, you know what? Let's bite the bullet. Maybe those people aren't there anymore, right? It's no longer the what's that? The not the pink elephant, right? It's no longer the prize project for somebody anymore. There's none of that, and so they're able to make that tough decision to, like, okay, let's deprecate our own hosted center. Let's go to the cloud. Good point. Hey, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Healthcare IT Today with John Lynn and Colin Hung. Today we're talking about big deal, little deal, or no deal. All right, let's get to this third one. This one's kind of interesting, John. Big deal, little deal, or no deal that a larger percentage of payers accepted fax submissions in 2024 versus 2023, and that 15% more payers returned prior auth determinations via fax in 2024 versus 2023, according to an Infinitus Systems report that was studying the trends in prior auth.
I mean, what a study on prior auth, right? We know that prior auth's a problem. We've talked about this before. It's the bane of every doctor's existence. So is it surprising that healthcare organizations, payers, are doing a larger percentage of prior auth communication using fax submissions? Man, I mean, the big deal is that it's going up, right? Like that is where it's a big deal. That like we haven't given a better option to payers and that payers haven't embraced a better option to be able to communicate with providers. And I've said this before, I'll say it until fax disappears, which is fax has compelling reasons. We know the fax number of every healthcare organization, and we know the standard that we can send the data that everyone accepts, right? Like those are the two golden eggs of fax, right? If we could replicate that, I'm pretty sure payers would use something else. It'll be interesting to see what Epic's doing with some of their prior auth, work with payers. Could that impact some of this? But the fact that they still go back to and say, let's do a fax, it's a big deal and it's sad, right? Like that is sad that we're still embracing it the way we do. I understand why it's the case, but man, this is a sad state for healthcare.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I don't know what to make of this one. I think from a fax perspective, it's a big deal. It's a big deal that fax actually grew in a certain sector of healthcare versus shrank because we've all been hearing about, fax is slowly declining. Here we are, there's, a statistic saying actually it increased and by a significant amount, like double digit percentages here, not like, by singles. But to your point, you know, prior auth is just it's an area where just like we all kind of sigh when we talk about it, right? It's like, oh, prior auth, right? Like, so to me, it's like, it's a little deal because we should really be rethinking that whole area anyway, right? So is this really going to be a big deal, a year or two from now when we finally get around to fixing what this whole prior auth was meant to do? Because every person I talk to and from every stakeholder in the prior auth is going, this is not really achieving what it set out to achieve. Like this is not really curbing fraud or spending or anything. It's actually just adding burden onto everybody. And are we really making a difference? And no study yet or anybody has been able to show that it's really making the impact that it was supposed to have when this was introduced. So I believe that this is just not going to be a big deal because we're going to be talking about the new prior auth 2.0 in not too much longer.
So what you said to me is a big deal. You think within 1 to 2 years, prior auth is gonna not be solved, but be improved so much that this stat's gonna change? Like that feels like a big deal to me. I don't have that confidence that prior auth's gonna evolve that quickly. Maybe if you'd said 5 years, I could take it in. I might take 10 though. I'm taking the over on five. I'm definitely taking the over on two. But you think it's gonna be that quick?
I just think that someone's going to wake up and go, guys, this is completely broken. And no one like there doesn't seem to be any one of the stakeholders going, I want to keep it. Like I think everyone would go, if someone can come up with a better alternative, like let's go. Like I don't think anyone, unlike other systems where there was always one party who was like, no, this is good for me, so let's keep it. I haven't heard that about prior auth, which leads me to believe if somebody can come up with something credible and alternative to it that achieves the goal that originally set out to be, which is preventing fraud and reducing costs and all those, preventing unnecessary care, all those things, I think there would be more movement to move towards that new thing than this one. Now, you could argue, is that going to solve it? Maybe not, but yeah, I'm pretty optimistic on this one, that it could change relatively quickly.
Well, I hope you're right. I think what's interesting about this stat is it's embarrassing. Like, as healthcare IT people, like if we were to go to any other industry, like if you were to go to industry dinner with a wide variety of CIOs and CTOs, and you talk about facts, they would all look at you and be like, what the heck are you doing? Right. And obviously they don't understand the industry, and that would be illustrated completely. And it happens with all these startup founders who come into healthcare and they're like, why are we doing facts? Like, help me understand that. Right. And then you look at the details, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's a hard problem to solve, right? But Like, man, if we were in any other industry circle, who else uses fax? Like they don't, So I mean, there's a couple, but anyway, that's the big deal that's interesting to me. And maybe we shouldn't use embarrassment as a strategy to drive change, but there's a reason why we should be embarrassed, and that's because there could be a better option. We just haven't either built it and or embraced it in the way that we should. So I think that's the problem.
Yeah, there's not many industries that are being supported as much as fax is by healthcare. Now I'm sure there are other industries that use it, and to your point, it's still the most ubiquitous form of interoperability, right? Like everyone's got one. The technology is solid. It works 99.9999% of the time. So, that's why it is still used. But yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's shouting from the rooftops how much fax they actually are using.
Yeah, yeah. You don't claim that in the news. Hey, hospital A, B, and C did awesome. We sent 1 million faxes. Look how interoperable we are. Trust us, patients, right? Like, there is another industry or group that uses fax as much as healthcare, I think, and that's the government. The government organizations use fax. You have to submit fax things for all sorts of ridiculously important stuff to the government, but that's the way that they've done it, and they don't have a better option. They haven't gotten to it yet, whatever reason. They're still using fax. But again, like, so healthcare should be copying the government as a model of efficiency and effectiveness. Probably not, right? That's not who we want to emulate.
No. And just to clarify, when we talk facts, we're talking about like physical facts, which is I think what this study was looking at, versus the fax protocol, which we know it can be a protocol. Like that's okay. But
Well, it is an
fact
interesting question. How many faxes are actually printed? My guess is like not very many in healthcare. I think they are digital fax now. I don't know. I don't know the stat on that, but I would guess it's a large percentage are all digital now, right? We're not, yeah. Thankfully, I think we got rid of the thermal roller. Those were like misery for anyone that had it, and a little heat outside and you lose your fax. But I don't think there's much printing going on in fax now. I could be
That's
wrong.
very true. No, that's true. You're probably right. I mean, again, that would be an interesting stat for someone to come up with and for us to look at maybe the next time we do this kind of episode.
Who's going to admit that they're still printing fax
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. That's true too. Like, oh yeah, we went through this many reams of paper. Um, Probably not a stat you want to highlight. Well, let's get to the final one, John. And I think this is a fun one. Big deal, little deal, or no deal that we are actually on our 150th episode of this podcast.
Can you believe it? 150 episodes together. That's I mean, we're totally biased on this response. I think it's a pretty big deal. Who makes it to 150? I didn't pull up the exact stats on podcasting, but our host has put out some stats that basically talk about, and you can see it because it's in their business model. Because if you make it to 15 episodes, then you go a lot further, right? But the majority of them don't even make it to 15 episodes, right? And to make it to 150, I think it's a pretty big deal because there's not that many podcasts that make it to 150 episodes. Of course, if you look across all of healthcare IT today, we're at 700 episodes. So the fact that we're still doing this and all the other, interviews podcasts, CIO podcasts, soon Sway Health podcasts, etc., like, I don't know, 150 feels like quite an accomplishment, I have to say.
Yeah, I think the number of episodes is less impressive to me just because we've been doing it. It's more that we've kept up with it, right? Like week in, week out, we've been there. We continue to do the episodes, and that to me is that A, it's been fun, of course, but B, that to me is the harder thing to do, right? Is to find the time every couple of weeks to do this and put these together. That yeah, I'm pretty proud of that record. And you're right. I mean, not many other podcasts just in general reached 150. And the fact that we've been able to do it in healthcare, in health IT, is a testament to the fact that there is such a vibrant community out there that's listening and enjoying what we're putting out there. So thank you to all the listeners, first of all. But yeah, it's been fun. I mean, I know we weren't doing a retrospective, but I think part of the reason why it's been so fun is that we kind of mix up. It's not always just you and I just riffing on the latest headlines. It's, we throw some of these kinds of big deal, no deal. We've done the ones is, are you buying or selling? And we've done ones where it's just random questions and just, I think that's kind of added to that and helped us get through some of the more grinding times, is that we could do some fun episodes. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a great ride.
You're right. I think the big deals are that we've published every 2 weeks and never missed. That's a pretty big deal, right? And shout out to Healthcare Now Radio that syndicates this initially, right, on their radio station. I think that pushed us to do that, right? So, that's a big deal. The second big deal is that we still have stuff to talk about. Like I don't think we're still not scraping the bottom of the barrel for what to talk about. So the industry is moving so quickly. And then the third is that we still get so many people who download it, right? We're getting thousands of people that are still listening to the episodes and appreciate it. So you're right. I think it is a big shout out to the listeners that they appreciate what we do, and that, we hopefully are making their lives better and improving their understanding of what's happening in health IT. We're pretty blessed to be able to go to so many conferences and to talk to so many interesting people that allows us to be able to do episodes like this, that we can share the insights and perspectives from the work we do. So that is really a blessing, and I appreciate all the listeners for supporting it.
Well, yeah, and thank you to anyone who's listening to this while working out or like walking or in their car, or hey, even if you're listening to this to help yourself fall asleep, we're good with that.
Yeah, let us
Thank you.
know on social media. I want to hear how do you listen to the healthcare IT today episodes.
Yeah, yeah, that would be fun. And then thank you to all of you who come up to us and at the shows and say that you're a listener. We do appreciate that. We don't mind that at all. And hey, if you've got ideas for upcoming episodes, we always appreciate that as well. So thank you to all of you who tuned into this episode of Healthcare IT Today, and for all 150 episodes of Healthcare IT Today. You can always find more details about our show by checking out the programs page on healthcarenowradio.com. And please share your voice and engage with the community at healthcareittoday.com and on social media using the hashtag HITSM. I'm Colin Hung, along with my friend and Health IT collaborator, John Lynn. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.